Aleph Dalet. There were 7 gateways in the courtyard, 3 in the north, and 3 in the south, and 1 in the east. In the south was the kindling gate, second to it was the gates of the firstborn, and third to it was the water gate. In the east was the Nicanor gate, and this gate had 2 chambers, one to the right, one to the left. One was the chamber of Pinchas and the clotherer, and the other was the chamber of the makers of the Chavitim. In those gateways in the north, the gate of the Ray, and this gateway was like a pavilion, and a loft was built on top of it so that the Kohen would spend guard above it and a pavilion below. It had an opening to the Chel, and second to it was the gate of the offering, third to it was the hall of the fire. And there were 4 chambers in the hall of the fire, like suites that opened up into a ballroom. 2 chambers were located in the consecrated portion of the hall of fire, and 2 were located in the unconsecrated portion. And the ends of beams separated between the consecrated area and the unconsecrated area. And what purpose did these chambers serve? The southwest chamber was the chamber of the sacrificial lambs. The southeastern chamber was the chamber of the maker of the pot of bread. The northeast chamber was the sons of the Hashmonim, and concealed the stones of the altar that the Greek kings had defiled. And the northwestern chamber through the Kohanim would descend to the immersion room. Okay, there was a part yesterday that you weren't sure of in the Hebrew.
Yeah, that's right. We were trying to translate it, and I didn't actually manage to find another diagram yet. Meaning I forgot to look afterwards. I've got a lovely diagram in my Kahati app over here, all in full color, but it's not so easy to get this down. So I'm going to use this diagram in Kahati wherever from my cell phone wherever possible, and translate that into whatever I see on the diagram over there.
Okay.
All right. So. So there were 2 gates in the Beit HaMoked. The Beit HaMoked is represented by this picture over here. It's not in the same location over here as it is on my phone. Actually, it is in the same physical location, right by this extension over here of the antechamber.
Right.
Okay. So the ulam is the hall before, and then the antechamber before the Kodesh, before the Heichal. So the Beis HaMoked was over here, and it had 2 gates, one on the inside and one on the outside. Okay, Echad Pasuach Lachel. So over here, if you went out on this side, on the northern side, you'd wind up in the Chel area surrounding the Azara. Okay. And here you could walk in and find yourself in the Azara just outside the Olam. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, ze haya pasuach la'azara, ze shehaya pasuach la'azara, pishpesh katan hayalo. So it also had a secondary gate. Says Rabbi Yehuda, shebo nichnasin livlosh es ha'azara, which is the one that they used when they went in to perform maintenance on the Azara. So they basically every morning when they woke up, that was the gate that they used to go through. Okay. So Mishna Ches, Beis HaMoked. So again, talking about the Beis HaMoked here, it haya kippah. So there was a dome on top of it. Ubayis gadol haya. It was a big, significant structure. Mukaf rovdim shel even, and it had rows of stone around it. V'ziknei beis av yisheinim sham, and this is where the elders of each house of Kohanim would sleep. Umaftechos ha'azar biyadam, they held the keys to the Azar in their hands. Upirchei kohana ish kisas ba'aretz. So remember, we learned that in Maseches Tamid, right at the beginning of Maseches Tamid, when we had all the Kohanim sleeping on the ground. This is a description again of the same phenomenon of who slept in the Beis HaMoked, and but we're going to get a little bit more detail over here. Mishna Tes, Makom Hayasham Ama Alama. There was an Ama and a square, but Tavla Shel Shaish, and there was a flagstone with a ring set into it. Okay, and underneath it was a chain that the keys were suspended by. So somebody would sleep on top of this flagstone to make sure nobody got in unauthorized. And in the morning, when it was time for them to get up, they would pick up the flagstone by the ring, and underneath it was the keys, and then they could take the keys and go in. Higias man hani'ila. Came time to lock up. Higbia es a tabla b'tabas. He would lift up the stone by the stone by the with the key with the ring. And he took the keys off the chain. And he would lock it from the inside. And then the Levi would sleep on top of the stone outside to make sure that nobody would access it unauthorized. Gamar milinol, when they finished locking, he would return the keys to the chain, and return the flagstone to its position. Nasan kasursa aleha, he would put his clothing on top of it, and he would sleep on top of it. Era keri be'echad mehem. Now, what happens if one of the kohanim has a tumas keri? This is again repeating what we saw in Maseches Tamid. He would go into that secret tunnel that went underneath the bira, and there were flames burning on either side of the corridor until he gets to the mikveh. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer b'mesiba ha'oleches tachas hachel v'yotzei v'holech lo b'tadi. He went to a tunnel that went underneath the whole chel, and he would come out and leave the Har HaBayis through the Tadi gate.
All right.
Okay, and that's that.
Sounds like the tunnels in Gaza.
Not at all like the tunnels in Gaza.
Okay. Tommy. Gimel Chet. From Yericho, they would hear the sound of the great gate being opened. From Yericho, they would hear the sound of the shovel. From Yericho, they would hear the sound of the wood that Beit Katan fashioned into a wheel for the lever. And from Yericho, they would hear the sound of Givina, the crier. From Yericho, they would hear the sound of the flute. From Yericho, they would hear the sound of the cymbals. From Yericho, they would hear the sound of the Levium song. From Yericho, they would hear the sound of the shofar. And some would say also the sound of the Kohen Gadol when he mentions the name of God on the floor. From Yericho, they would smell the fragrance of the compound incense. And Eliezer then Digla said there were goats in my father's household on the mountain of Mikvar, and they would sneeze because of the fragrance of the compounded incense. The Kohen who won the privilege of clearing the ashes, the Kohen who won the privilege of clearing the ashes of the inner altar entered and took the basket and placed it in front of himself, and he would soup up the ashes and place them into the basket. At the end, he swept the rest inside, and he left the basket and went out. The Kohen who won the privilege of cheering the ashes from the menorah entered the Heichel, and if he found the 2 eastern lamps burning, he would clear the ashes from the rest of the lamps and would leave those 2 burning in their place. If he found that the 2 eastern lamps were extinguished, he would clear the ashes and relight them from those that were still burning, and afterwards he would clear the ashes from the rest. And there was a stone in front of the menorah in which there were 3 steps, upon which the Kohen would stand and prepare the lamps, and he would place the jug on the 2nd step and exit. I could never understand that, Mishna. Why did he just take the jug with him? Why did he just take it with him? Why did he have to leave it?
Later on in the ceremony, all of the Kohanim took out all of these kalim and stood on the top step together. So they were there was, for some reason, they wanted to synchronize all of the different kalim that needed to be taken out, so that they would all be standing together.
They would not tie up the lamb, but rather they would bind it, Akeda style. Rashi says, whoever won the privilege of carrying the limb could hold the lamb, and this is how the lamb was positioned in his binding. His head pointed to the south, its face was to the west, the slaughterer hands on the east side of the lamb, and his face was toward the west. The Talmud of the morning was slaughtered by the northwest corner of the altar on the 2nd ring, and the Talmud of the evening was slaughtered in the northwest corner on the 2nd ring. The slaughterer slaughtered and received and the receiver of the blood received it. He came to the northwest corner of the altar and would apply the blood to the east and to the north. It came to the southwest corner, he would apply the blood to the west and to the south. And the Kohen would pour the remainder of the blood onto the southern base of the altar.
Okay.
All right. That's it.
Middos.
And okay, Beit Aleph. For lack atonement offerings and for offerings for intentional as well as inadvertent transgressions. There are the ones who lack atonement offerings, the Zava, the woman who have given birth, and the Matzorah. But Eliezer Yonyako says a proselyte too lacks atonement until the blood is sprinkled for him, and so does Nazir for his wine, his hair cutting, and his tumah. These bring an offering So these bring in base. These bring in offering for intentional as well as inadvertent transgression. He who cohabitates with a betrothed maidservant, a Nazir who became Tameh for the oath of the testimony and for the oath of the deposit. 5 bring a single offering for many transgressions, and 5 bring a variable or sin offering. If these bring a single offering for many transgressions, he who cohabitates with a slave woman many times, Nazir became Tameh many times, he who warned his wife concerning many men, and a Mizorah who became afflicted with many lesions. If he brought his birds and was then again afflicted, they do not count for him until he brings his katos, and Yehuda says until he brings his asham.
Okay.
So I don't get this diagram off here so you can see it.
Next up is Menachos. Sorry, I don't need to keep sharing this. Okay.
You are okay. Okay, Menachos, and we have Yud Dalet. They would reap it and place it in the baskets and bring it to the temple courtyard. They would toast it in the fire in order to fill the mitzvah of toasting. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. For the common say, they beat it with reeds and stalks so that it should not be crushed. Then they would place it in a pipe, which was perforated so that the fire would prevail over all of it. They would spend it out in the courtyard and the wind would blow on it. They would place it in a gristmill and extract from it an isaron, which was sifted with 13 sieves. The remainder is redeemed and may be eaten by anyone. If it is subject to kala but exempt from ma'isa, Rabbi Akiva declares it subject to kala and ma'isa. He approached the isaron and put it in its oil and its frankincense, and then he poured it mixed and waved and brought it near to the altar and performed katmitza and performed it on the altar, and the remainder is eaten by the kohanim. If the omer was offered, they would go out and find the marketplace of Yerushalayim full of flour and a flour of toasted grain, which was against the will of the common. These are the words of Rameah. Rabbi Yehuda says it was in accordance with the will of the sages that they did it. And the omer was offered, the new grain was permitted immediately, and those who were distant were permitted from midday and onward. After the temple was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted the entire day of waving should be forbidden. Said Rabbi Yehuda, it is not biblically forbidden, as it is stated, until this very day. Why are those who are disciplined from midday and onward? Because they know that the court does not procrastinate with it. Okay.
Yeah, and also Vav.
Right. The Omer offering redeemed the new grain, permissible in the provinces, and the Shtei Halechem did so in the temple. We do not bring mikvah offerings or Korim or the mikvah offering of an animal prior to the Omer offerings, and if brought, it is invalid. And prior to the Shtei Halechem, one may not bring, but if he brought, it's valid.
Okay.
And we are at let's see.
Yeah.
Vav Dalet. If no, that's what Vav.
Yeah.
One rents a donkey on which to bring wheat, and he brings barley on it, he is liable. Grain, and he brings straw on it, he is liable because the added bulk is difficult to carry. If he rents it to bring a less of wheat, and he brings a less of barley, he is exempt. But if he added to its load, he is liable. How much must he add to his load to be liable? Sumta says in the name of Rabbiah, a saw for a camel, 3 cows for a donkey. All craftsmen are regarded as paid shomer, and any of these who say, take your article and bring money is an unpaid shomer. If one says, watch for me and I will watch for you, he is a paid shomer. If one says, watch for me and he replies, put it down for me, he is an unpaid shomer. If he lent him on security, he is a paid shomer. If Rabbi Yehuda says, if he lent him money, he is unpaid shomer. If he lent him produce, he is a paid shomer. Abba Shul says, the person may rent out a poor man's security, fixing a price and progressively diminishing the debit, because he is as one who returns a lost article.
Right. Okay.
Did you know, by the way, I know how you are. Did you know that they didn't really plan this happy times? Okay. This is Chet Vav. An onan, and one who clears away a pile of rubble, likewise one whom they have promised to release him from prison, and a sick or an aged person able to eat the viand of an olive, they slaughter on their behalf. For any of these, they may not slaughter for them alone, because lest they cause the Pesach offering to become invalid. Therefore, if any disqualifications befall them, they are exempt from participating in the second Pesach, except for the one who was clearing a pile of rubble and he was found to be contaminated with retroactively. They may not slaughter the Pesach offering for an individual, but these are the words of Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Yossi permits it. Even if a group consists of 100 people, they are unable to eat the viand of an olive, they may not slaughter it on their behalf. We may not form a group solely of women, minors, and slaves. An owner immerses himself and eats his Pesach offering in the evening, but may not eat other offerings. One who hears about the death of his relative, or one who has arranged for bones of a close relative to be gathered on his behalf, immerses himself and eats the offering. If a proselyte has been converted on the eve of Pesach, Beis Shammai says he reverses himself and eats of his Pesach offering in the evening. Beis Hillel says one who separates himself from an uncircumcised state is like one who separates himself from the grave.
And that's one of the chumras of Beis Hillel over Beis Shammai.
All right, many. Okay, we have Makshirin. And we have Gimel Zion. Regarding donkey drivers who are passing through a river and their sacks fell into the water, if they were happy, it is included in the law of the water is placed. Rabbi Yehuda said it is impossible not to be happy, rather, only if they had turned the sacks over. If one's feet were full of mud and similar to the feet of his animal, and he passed through a river, he was happy. If it is included in the law of water, it is placed. Rabbi Yehuda says it is impossible not to be happy, rather only if he stood still and rinsed with regard to a person and a non-kosher animal, it is always tummy. Regarding one who brings wheels and a cattle gear down to the water during a heat wave in order that they bond, this water is included in the law of the water is placed. And regarding one who brings an animal down to the water to drink, the water that comes up in his mouth is included in the law of water is placed. But as for the water which is brought up on his legs, it is not included in the law of the water is placed. Having intended that its legs be rinsed, even the water brought up on its legs is included in the law of water is placed. During the time of foot sores and threshing, the water was always tummy. If a deaf, mute, a deranged person, or a minor brought the animal down to the water, even though he intended for its feet to be rinsed, the water is not included in the law of water is placed. But they have legal actions, but they do not have, not have legal actions. No, that's wrong. But they have legal actions, but they do not have legal intent. And regarding one who bent down to drink, the water that comes up in his mouth and mustache is included in the law if water is placed. But as for the water on his nose and his head and his beard, it is not included in the law of water is placed. And regarding one who fills a barrel with water, the water comes up on its outsides and on a rope that is coiled around its neck and on the rope that for its needs. This water is included in the law of water is placed. And how much is for its needs? Reb Shimon Elazar says a tefa. If he put beneath a pipe, the water is. If he put it beneath the pipe, the water is not included in the law of water is placed.
Okay, done.
Well, you can go have breakfast and everything, you know.
Yeah.
It's time.
Shkoyach, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.